past, you know, we hold them quarterly. We're changing things up a little bit this year, and we are going to also live stream the meeting. So hopefully creating some greater access to the conversation for folks who want to join virtually. We'll also, from our communications team here at DEED blog, we'll send a summary of the information discussed in today's meeting and push that out. So look forward to getting more information on the meeting going forward. Before we jump into the agenda, I want to do a quick round of introductions and just take a moment to introduce folks we have on the call from the state. I'm joined here today by my colleagues at DEED, Assistant Commissioner Evan Rowe, Government Relations Director Daryl Dannon, and Mark Simmer from our Business Assistance Office. From Commerce, we have Peter Brickery on the call. From Department of Revenue, we have Assistant Commissioner John Cloakson. From Department of Labor and Industry, Assistant Commissioner Nicole Blissenbach. And from Explore Minnesota, Lauren Bennett McGinty. So we've got a good set of people to provide updates from the state. And a great agenda. I know this will be a touch point here we have between now and really the beginning of summer. So we want to take a few minutes today and provide updates not only on agency items, but on some of the budget and legislative priorities moving across our agencies right now. And then we'll open up for questions and answers for the remainder of the time in the meeting. So I will pause and pass it over to my colleague, Assistant Commissioner Evan Rowe, for some updates from DEED to start off.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Good morning, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all those of you who celebrate. I have a quick update on the unemployment insurance program on behalf of DEED today. The update is really that there isn't that much news, unfortunately. If you've been following the news, you've probably seen that the legislature was not able to come to a deal on anything relating to the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. What that effectively means is that the tax rates and therefore the assessments that will be calculated off those tax rates that we sent back in December are still the current state law and are still the current the current bill that will be due. As a reminder, first quarter UI taxes are due April 30th for businesses here in Minnesota. I imagine there may be some questions on this later on, and I'd be happy to answer those, but that's the sort of non-update that we have for right now. And with that, I think I'll pass it over to Darielle with a legislative update. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. I'll jump into the ledge update then. So today is the day that the governor is releasing his revised supplemental budget. And we get an estimate of the revenue the state is collecting in November. The governor comes out with a recommendation for the legislature about how he'd recommend we spend those resources. And then we get a sort of final estimate of future revenues that the state will receive. And we get that in February. We like to call that the February forecast. And that projected that the state will have more revenues received than we had previously expected, but to the tune of about $1.5 billion. And so today, Governor Walz and our commissioner, and I think a number of the other commissioners are out with the governor, announcing his recommendations for that additional resources and just reminding folks of the original request as well. So I have to say, since I'm coming right on the heels of Evan, that the governor continues to have in his recommendations a proposal to replenish the UI Trust Fund. So he has proposed and will continue to work on getting that across the finish line, but that would ensure that those taxes that Evan, if it passed, let's say that, if it passed, that would ensure that those taxes that Evan just mentioned would not go into effect. It's a little tricky. We can talk about that later, but just a reminder that that continues to be part of the governor's recommendations. I'll just add the two new items though. And we had talked about kind of the whole portfolio. Happy to chat about that again, but we have two new items that are in the governor's revised supplemental budget today, and that is an investment of $20 million for the Main Street Revitalization Fund. So this is a package of resources available to communities that have had significant impacts on sort of their Main Street businesses. This sort of comes out of the civil unrest, but is not limited to just civil unrest rebuilding efforts. So that'll have another $20 million and another round of funding if that passes. And then we have another $5 million proposal for fiscal year 23, and then funding in the base budget. So funding in years moving forward for our business partnership grant. So that's funding to organizations that work with entrepreneurs, more of small businesses, and provides some hands-on information about getting started, questions about, the kind of questions that arise when you're a new and small business. So those are the two components of Deed's budget that are in the governor's revised supplemental. I might pause here because I do think that Elizabeth, don't yell at me, but I'm gonna maybe call my colleague Nicole to see if she wanted to jump in on DLI, because I think DLI has something as well that she might want to highlight. So I'm gonna pause there, and I'm gonna let my colleague jump in on other supplemental items you should be aware of.
Hi, everyone. And I'm not so Daria specifically which item you're talking about. So maybe I could pass it back to you if you want to highlight it, and then I can.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I know that there's a construction trade license change that's in the governor's supplemental, and I thought you might want to mention that item.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I had a feeling, but I wasn't quite sure. So you're what is being called a fee holiday, correct? So this is the news I've heard that it is included. So the governor is proposing a fee holiday for license fees collected by the Department of Labor and Industry. So those license fees would be waived for, I believe it's a period of a year. Is that correct, Ariel? I know that was what was proposed. I didn't know if that was what finally made it in.
Yep, that looks like, and we are, in some ways, we're getting the same information you're getting. So there's funding proposed in fiscal year 23, and it looks like 24 as well.
Okay, great.
So, looks like a 2-year fee holiday, Nicole. And I guess we'll update folks here as we're getting this is very fresh information. So if we get revisions, we'll absolutely update this group as well. I think it's back to you, Elizabeth.
Sounds good.
Sorry about going off of your plan just a touch there. I hope you didn't mind.
No, that's great. That's great. And lots of moving pieces, obviously, across the agencies right now. So we'll dig in. I do want to touch on, before we go through and around the horn on the agencies, some of you may have seen last Thursday, Deed released January's employment numbers. For those of you who follow the state's employment releases, you might know we actually released 2 months of employment numbers in March. So we released January numbers last week, and we'll do February's numbers on March 24th. Just to give some quick highlights here, relatively good news here. Last week's report showed positive momentum. Minnesota gained 10,200 jobs in January, and the private sector gained over 9,000 jobs. So obviously January had big growth despite Omicron and the backdrop of the peak of that variant. Looking at jobs growth over the month in Minnesota, we had 9 industry super sectors gain. And just in terms of some of the big gains that we saw, manufacturing was up by over 1,000, financial activities up, professional and business services were up, and leisure and hospitality were up. Losses were mainly in construction, which makes sense given it was January, just in terms of seasonal trends. And the unemployment rate ticked down in January to 2.9% from 3% in December of 2021. So there continues to be some positive momentum. We are seeing big racial disparities in terms of who's finding jobs. Our Labor Market Information Office has found that Black Minnesotans are having a harder time getting back into the workplace and finding employment compared to white Minnesotans. In January, the report showed that Black unemployment rate in Minnesota was at 6.2% compared to 3.4% for white residents or 5.6% for Latinos. And because of these smaller sample sizes, these numbers are on a 12-month moving average, which is why they're different from the overall state unemployment rate. Women dropped out of the labor force, as we all know, at a higher rate than men at the beginning of the pandemic. The gap is showing that it's closing, and we're seeing that throughout the 2 groups, which now look a little more similar. On Minnesota's labor force participation rate, that rose to 67.6% in January. And on the workforce front, just thinking about that rise in the labor force participation, we're thinking a lot about what that means in terms of our efforts to connect job seekers with good jobs. And you know, the labor force participation rate remains more than 5 percentage points higher than the nation's. So we're really pushing to continue to see our labor force participation rate grow and increase to help connect more people with good jobs. That's what we're doing at DEED. That's what we're doing at the state, and in continuing to keep that proactive approach to help businesses and workers connect during this historically tight labor market. Our career force job service team has made more than 100,000 phone calls to Minnesotans who are out of work, and we just remain laser focused on helping businesses and workers connect. And many of you know that's a huge priority for us at DEED. It's also a priority in our budget, and we're hoping to prioritize funding to modernize our workforce services as well. So those are just some updates from DEED today. So I will shift gears and look over to my colleagues here. Maybe we'll start, I'll go back to you, Nicole, if that works, and we can just go back to the Department of Labor and Industry for any other updates from Assistant Commissioner Blissenbach.
Great, thank you so much. Happy to be here, and sorry about the confusion. This is what you get when you invite me rather than our legislative director. But I do have the information now that is freshly in front of me. So related to building and construction trade licenses, what the governor has proposed in the revised supplemental budget is a 2-year fee holiday for building and construction trade license fees charged by the Construction Codes and Licensing Division here at the Department of Labor and Industry. So this fee holiday would provide economic relief to about 79,000 construction-related licensees who renew or obtain a new professional license with the department. And that includes then the fees that would have been charged that won't be charged, includes an appropriation to the department to cover that for the next 2 years. So that is the big news today. So now that I was able to fully brief that, I also want to highlight some of the items in the supplemental budget for the Department of Labor and Industry that do probably pertain to the folks listening on this call. And I'll do that pretty quickly because I know we've got a lot of updates on here. But the first, and I know this has been receiving news and it's been taking up a lot of our time and attention at the Department of Labor and Industry, is, of course, recognizing our frontline workers with frontline worker pay. The governor has recommended $1 billion to provide payments to frontline workers who have really sacrificed during the pandemic to keep Minnesotans safe, healthy, fed, and cared for. So this proposal would provide about $1,500 payments to an estimated 667,000 workers in sectors including healthcare, childcare, school, grocery workers, food service workers, transportation workers, really the workers that needed to work outside their home in close proximity with the public and their coworkers, and put themselves at risk to keep the rest of us safe and cared for during the pandemic. That is a priority, and we are continuing to work on that, and we hope we will see good progress on that throughout the session. Also included in the supplemental budget for labor and industry is paid family and medical leave. The appropriation for us would include a lot of education and then, of course, the compliance costs, so the enforcement pieces of that legislation. Earned sick and safe time as well. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely reminded us that people need to be able to take time off of work in order to care for themselves or for family members. And it's also become clear throughout COVID that we don't want sick employees going to work. So earned sick and safe leave really does address that issue and requires that a certain amount of paid time off is accrued for hours worked. The next item we have that may be relevant to a portion of our viewers today is prevailing wage education and compliance. We are estimated to receive here in Minnesota more than $6 billion in federal funding during the coming years, much of which will be used for public infrastructure projects. Those projects will be covered by prevailing wage laws, and we know that it's vitally important for the Department of Labor and Industry to get out and help educate contractors and employers on their obligations under prevailing wage laws, as well as federal Davis-Bacon laws, so that we can see compliance with those laws that do take effect. So we're asking for additional funds for that education and compliance efforts related to that. We also have a proposal that came out of the Agricultural Worker Wellness Committee to expand and strengthen fair labor standards laws for agricultural and food processing workers. So that was a recommendation that came out of that committee, and really does make some necessary changes to some laws that are in effect but have not been updated in many years. We also have a proposal to increase equity in apprenticeship. The governor has recommended a $1.375 million operating increase to grow registered apprenticeship in the state of Minnesota and to train, reskill, and upskill the state's workforce. We know apprenticeship programs are extremely successful in creating well-trained workers and to be put in jobs that earn family-sustaining wages. We're also looking at growing opportunities for student learners with an additional ask for our youth skills training program that we run through the Department of Labor and Industry. And that supports the development of partnerships among school districts, employers, and other community organizations to offer safe, healthy, and meaningful work experience to 16 and 17-year-old student learners. And I think that those are the ones I wanted to highlight for this group. So I will hand it back to you, Elizabeth.
Thanks so much. Being shared today. So if folks have questions, I would just encourage you to, if you can, go back to that email that Mark Simmer sent, and there should be a link with a form link there. If you'd like to send any questions in, we're happy to review and entertain those questions towards the end of the call. I will shift over to Department of Commerce and invite Assistant Commissioner Peter Brickwitty to share some updates from their agency.
Thanks very much. Nice to be with everybody again. A couple of updates that I'll share are we continue to see across the board increases in licensing and registration applications, particularly in our financial institutions divisions. Deputy Commissioner Max Zappia, who I know has often joined this call when I'm not able to be here, shared with me yesterday, they've had a 50% growth in franchise applications, which is representative of the economic growth that we're seeing in the state, but is also increasing some wait times in our office as we process those upticks in applications. So he asked me to put in a plug for patience and grace for us as we move through that backlog as quickly as possible. We've also been working with our regulated parties across all of Commerce's partner industries to be looking at cyber risks, which is, I'm sure, something that is being worked on by everybody on this call. But just wanted to put in a plug that is something that we're working with our partners on, to have cyber incident plans in place for companies to be actively assessing their risk and maintaining diligence given everything that's happening in the global situation. One other really exciting thing to note from financial institutions, and I think this was covered in the Star Tribune last weekend, and hope everybody saw it, but for the first time in 14 years, we are issuing a de novo bank charter next week in the state of Minnesota to a new state chartered financial institution. So that is something that is a big process and a big victory for that organization and for the department to finally have that underway. A couple of other things that I want to touch on that are legislative. The Department of Commerce does not have any major supplemental budget changes from what had been released in January, so I won't go through them in detail, but just a point to say that there is significant job growth potential in our legislative package, particularly the energy-related items, which are really focused on lowering costs for Minnesotans and helping them adapt to the changing climate situation that we have through additional energy assistance, and then also programs like building out weatherization and having investments in clean energy tech and projects across the state. We also have funding in the governor's budget for wastewater and drinking water energy program feasibility study that's really interesting, related to looking at wastewater facilities around the state and whether or not they could be pilot programs for renewable energy, combined heat and power, energy efficiency, or energy storage opportunities. So that's something that we're very excited about in our office. We also have a $20 million proposal one time, which is state matching funds for projects that we would be able to pursue through the federal infrastructure bill. And I think our hope would be at the next call to have staff from our Division of Energy Resources be on the call to talk about opportunities that are coming to Minnesota through the infrastructure bill that was passed at a federal level. There are a number of major buckets related to electric grid reliability and resilience, helping people save money, do it by doing energy efficiency projects, and the ability, if we pass that state competitiveness grant program, that will allow us to have matching grant funds to bring in many more federal dollars through formula projects, and also set us up to be potentially pursuing competitive opportunities along with other states. So I think we'd like to have our DER staff come in and talk about what's next. I think they've been working hard to get set up to start to solicit input from across the state about where people see opportunities in those spaces, and we should be able to talk about that much more in our next quarterly meeting. The other major thing that we're tracking that may be of interest to some folks on this call is Commerce is heavily involved in the conversations between the House and Senate and the governor's office related to the extension of the reinsurance program. The governor's budget contained a reinsurance program extension for 5 years, paid for through an assessment mechanism on the fully insured health insurance market, which is how the state's high risk pool prior to ACA implementation was funded as well, and is employed now in 2 states. The Senate has passed a reinsurance extension bill using general fund dollars, primarily off the floor. I expect the House to pass their bill next week. So that's something that we are on track to hopefully have resolved by April 1st, so we can continue to pursue the federal activities that are required to make sure that that program is extended with no interruption in 2023. And then lastly, I will note that we are not quite to, but not too far away from real estate license renewal season, which opens on May 1st. And I expect there to be a story in the Star Tribune this coming weekend on an interesting story following people who entered the real estate industry during the pandemic and made career changes. That class of realtors is going to be coming up for their first renewal this year by June 30th of 2022. So I think that'll be an interesting profile to see how those people are doing, having made career changes in what is obviously a very competitive and hot housing market in the state. So with that, I will pass it back and happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll keep going here in the agency lineup. I will introduce Assistant Commissioner John Kloxiam from Department of Revenue. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. So like a lot of people have already said, we don't have a lot of revised changes in the supplemental tax bill. So what is out there already is obviously going to be revised for costs, and we've done that for the new forecast. But just a couple things in there that you may not be aware of that I want to point out. Most of the tax bill is focused on children and family, and I think that was the governor's big push this year. But the angel investment tax credit and ensuring that that continues and gets a little bump is in there, and that I believe that program has provided over $490 million in tax credit over its life. So important program, certainly. And then also we have federal conformity. Currently, we're 6 bills out from that have been passed at the federal level for which the agency is not conformed to yet. And so we want to make sure that for the simplicity of taxpayers and the agency as well, to be quite frank, we want to make sure that we can do that conformity and ease the administrative burden for everybody involved. I would like to provide a little update on the filing season and where we're at. So we opened our filing season on January 24th. And to date, St. Patrick's Day, we've had 1,169,000 returns in, and we over a season we expect about 3 million. So we're kind of, I would say, a third of the way, and towards our goal in about a month here. And so we've issued refunds on 719 returns, and the typical wait time right now is about 9 days for electronic and 16 days for paper. Those timelines will stretch out a little bit as we near the end, obviously, but we're turning it around in about a week and a half right now. And we're not having some of the issues that they're having at the federal level. We continue to work and continue to get those out. I also wanted to provide a little update on our adjustments that we've done for the PPP and UI provisions for the 2020 tax year. In July 1st of 2021, we had tax code changes from the Minnesota legislature. And so the agency went back and we've adjusted about 540,000 returns for those changes. And resulting in about $300 million returned to taxpayers as a result of that. We are through that process now, and it was kind of a heavy lift for us because right when we were doing that, after the law passed in July, we also have our heavy property tax refund season, and we process about 850,000 property tax refund returns as well. So happy to get that work done and get that adjustments made. And that's about all I have from revenue.
Great. Thank you so much for those updates from revenue. I'll kick it over to Lauren Bennett McGinty, who is the director of Explore Minnesota, for updates from our tourism department.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. So for those of you who don't know me, I started at Explore Minnesota Tourism in November, so I might be a new face for some of you. Some quick updates from our agency. We are going through a strategic planning process and hope to have a new strategic direction launched in July. We're doing stakeholder interviews and outreach right now. So some of you may have participated already, but there are future options. So if you are working closely with your DMOs or CVBs in your area, you will likely hear about some opportunities to share your feedback. Traveler sentiment is going up and up, though gas prices are also going up. So we're seeing some auto travel be a little dicey right now, just given that people are unsure about traveling with those higher prices. But overall, only 21% have recently indicated that COVID is still a concern for their travel plans. So it's positive that people will be coming back to Minnesota. And as we know, spring has now sprung because the sun is out and the snow is melted. So we do anticipate that more folks will be driving, flying, and making their way to Minnesota. And just a fun fact, MSP was voted the #1 airport in North America. So very exciting news there as well. EMT recently received $4 million in EDA funding, and all of that money, with the exception of $200,000 going to some research projects, will be used to fund out-of-state marketing campaigns to, again, attract visitors to Minnesota to bring money back to folks' businesses. And we recently gave out $1 million in marketing grants to 104 recipients. So we're, aiming to see a lot more out-of-state push there too. The one bill that we currently have in the House right now, it doesn't yet have a Senate companion, is to expand our tourism council from 28 to 35 members, including craft beverage establishments, chambers of commerce for underrepresented communities and tribal nations, as well as businesses representing arts and culture, sports, and outdoor recreation. So our goal there is to make sure we have as many voices in the room as possible as we work through this recovery and into the future. And then there are a couple other bills that we are tracking on this, but not put forward by us or the governor's office, but there are some bills out there for tourism improvement districts, an online hospitality jobs program, a tourism recovery grant program, which in the House was moved to Ways and Means for $10 million, but in the Senate was laid over for $6 million. And there is a bill to fund the Minnesota Sports and Events Group through Explore Minnesota Tourism. and that bill has not yet had a hearing. I believe that those are all my updates.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Lots going on for tourism. I appreciate you joining the call. We have about a half an hour left, and I know we have a few questions in the hopper, so I will turn it over to my colleague, Mark Simmer, to walk us through some of the questions, and the team will answer them as best we can.
Hi, everyone. Mark Simmer here. Sorry for the slight problem with getting the Q&As live, but we have questions submitted. The first question I'll read is, I would like to be included in the, sorry, I already answered that one. What is the most recent median wage for 7-county metro area as published by the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development? I'll stay on here. We already have an answer to that. It is $24.93. There is a link that I will be sharing out for that information also in the summary. So we will move to the second question here. Would the proposed Main Street Economic Revitalization Program included in the governor's revised budget just extend the existing program, or would there be potential changes to the program? Many rural communities felt left out of the program due to it not being able to participate, and the timeliness associated in the program were not feasible for anything other than shovel-ready projects. And Elizabeth, would you like me to go to Jerry L with that?
Happy to answer. Yeah, happy to jump in here. Great question. The idea that we're planning to move forward on this is to essentially inject a third round of an RFP on the program. So we did an RFP for the program shortly after the legislative session ended. We just closed a second RFP on that program, and with the additional 20 million, we would do a third RFP. The timing is set for essentially this summer, and then probably you don't recall the program very closely, but I do. And then there's sort of a cleanup fourth RFP with that would sort of remain in case dollars got returned to the fund or whatnot. So that's essentially what we would do, is inject another RFP, and hopefully that would help address some of the timing issues, which I think we're very aware of. I know the legislature wanted dollars to get out very quickly, so they set those two RFPs that we've already gone through pretty fast for communities. So hopefully this would also help if communities were, imagining something or maybe even propose something in one of those first two rounds. Maybe it didn't get funded. It could come in for the third round. I will also remind folks that also organizations that had applied for and maybe even received funding in the first two rounds, and we haven't awarded the second round yet, but those organizations are eligible to come in for a third round as well. So just a little reminder to everyone that it is intended to be sort of flexible. So hopefully that helps folks. But I will just say happy to hear feedback. This is a proposal we're kind of putting in the hopper right now. So if there's other feedback we should be aware of, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Mark, I think we have one more question. Would you like to read it out loud here for the
Absolutely. I'm going to get to that. Thank you, Jeriel. Yes. Are there any programs being proposed by Governor Walz that would further incentivize solar, wind projects? Some energy companies have cited they will not take on these projects unless further tax incentives are introduced, as they have reached the state's clean energy goals. And Mr. Brickwitty, would you like to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think there are a number of proposals that have been talked about. So the governor's budget does have a one-time additional set of funding for the Solar for Schools statewide program. I know initial interest for that program has been really significant. Now that's the program that's outside of Xcel Energy's service territory, and we've just released just a week or two ago. And Mark, I can follow up and get this out to you. The list of the first 70 some odd projects that received funding through that program. So we're looking to expand that and also open it up for tribal organizations to potentially also be eligible as well. There are a number of other development programs that I think could also be useful. That state competitive funds match that I talked about is, I think, going to be a critical part of how we unlock the full potential of the infrastructure dollars. We also have a proposal for an innovative green financing authority, which would help support larger projects where, excuse me, where conventional financing opportunities really isn't available, and give the opportunity to try to leverage projects that are still in that visioning stage, but need that extra assistance and haven't been able to find it in the private capital market. I think that's a really exciting opportunity. The state of Connecticut is a model for us there, and the state that they, having recently expanded the scope of their green investment bank, found that for every dollar they invested, they got $7 in return. So it's we've got a pretty established model there. And as I mentioned, I think that wastewater and drinking energy feasibility program also could be a source of opportunity, particularly for solar, and also combined heat and power. I think that proposal, in addition to looking at feasibility of projects, also may be able to be used to fund portions of renewable energy projects that aren't eligible for like a public facilities authority funding. So I think there is a lot of opportunities. I by am no means the expert, would be happy to connect whoever asked that question. Mark, I can't see it in my chat at the moment, with some of our subject matter experts to give you more details if you would like.
Great. I think that actually rounds out our questions for today.
Thank you, Peter.
So we will share updates as we usually do following the call. And just to remind folks, we did record it. So if you'd like to pass on to your colleagues or other external partners, feel free to do so. Our next meeting is scheduled. I think it's should be held on your calendar for June 16th. So it seems far off, but lots to do between now and then. So just a thanks to all of my colleagues at our sister agencies who joined us today. And we look forward to being in touch with you over the next months. It will be a busy few months. So thanks for joining, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everyone.